All right, at this point, we know how to connect to our database. We know how to select data from our database and display it on our web page using PHP. And it should look a little something like this. Right here, we have our handy dandy Bootstrap table with all of the data that we have in our database. Now, keep in mind, your data in your database might differ from mine because I've added a couple different entries and you might not have the exact same ones. But as long as it's pulling from your database, then you're good to go. So now that we know how to do that, we need to learn how to insert data into the database using our web page rather than going about it in PHPMyAdmin, like so. Insert, and you go ahead and insert the data, then hit go. That would submit a query to the MySQL database and add the new entry or the new row into your database, and you'll see it here. But we don't want to do it that way. We want to actually do it from our web page, our PHP application or web page, which opens up a whole new world when it comes to web development, because then you can have users submit new entries to your database, whether it's adding a new user, updating your password, adding a new blog post, so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and do that. Now jump back to your code editor and create a new file called insert.php. And what I want you to do is copy the content from index.php, select everything and copy it. And we're just going to paste it in here. And we're going to just change a few things around just so we have a basic skeleton. The reason why I'm doing this is because I want to have access to the HTML. We already have our include up here for the connection. And we just want to have the Bootstrap style so it looks a little bit nicer. So let's start off by, we're going to remove the query in the result. We'll do a new one in a moment here. Keep the include. Change the title to MySQL insert, because that's what we're going to be doing, the insert MySQL query. And then again here, MySQL insert. And what we're going to do now is just remove everything in this PHP script right here. Okay. Now save. Now you have the basic structure here. You shouldn't have anything really showing up in your insert. There we go. It's just kind of blank. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and I'm going to show you the MySQL query that we need to do in order to insert data into our database. So I'm just going to add it here in a comment. All right. So this is the MySQL query that we're going to be using. We're going to use the insert into the users table. And then in the parentheses, we have the different columns in our table there: ID, username, password, email, sign up date, and biography. And then values. So this is the values that we're going to enter into the table. And so we have null for the ID because we don't want to update the ID because it's going to auto update or auto increment itself. And in strings, we have all the values. So Jackson Smith for the username, ABC123 for the password, jack@sun.com for the email. Current timestamp is MySQL command there to automatically add the current timestamp to the sign up date. And then in a string, we just have some text for the biography. And that is going to insert that data into the new row in our users table in our MySQL database. So the first thing we need to do is create a query variable. And we're going to say, basically we're going to, in a string, add this query. So it's going to store that query in that variable right there. And then what we need to do is go save that and go down into your PHP script here. And then we're going to add an if statement. And in that if statement, we're basically going to call the MySQLi query function, MySQLi _ query. And then the two arguments that it accepts are connection, which is if you have a connection to the database, which we've already done in our connection.php right here, con. So it's going to connect to the database. And then we're going to pass in the query that we added up here. And so basically this is saying if this passes as true, so if it connects and it accepts the query as a valid query, then it officially has entered a new record. So new record in database. And then else is going to be if either of those fail or if that function fails. Echo, we're going to say error. And then space, close that string. We're going to concatenate the query that we called. And then we're going to concatenate a break tag. Another concatenate MySQLi _ error. That's going to tell us the error. And then the connection variable it passes in as an argument. Save that. Now, technically, once we refresh, we're going to insert this exact entry into our database every time you refresh. So we're going to start with that just to show you to see if it works. So we're going to refresh here. It says error, insert into users, and then it has all of our query here that we called. You have an error in your SQL syntax. Check the manual that corresponds with your MySQL server near M. Jackson. This is my bio. Okay, so at line 2. This is great because it tells you where the error is and what the error is. So let's go up and see what this syntax error is. All right, it looks like, I'm assuming they mean line 2 in the query, which is 1, 2. And over here, I'm Jackson. The apostrophe, that's a problem. So the string, rather, because I have it in single strings, that's causing an error. So what I can do is put this in double strings, but then we have a little bit of a problem here. Looks like we have a string as well, which shouldn't be there. Actually, no, it should. Okay. So that's a problem. So we need to stay in single strings because we have double strings wrapping the entire query, which means we need to escape this single string right here with a backslash. If you remember that from our PHP, that's how you escape a quotation or a string, whether it's single or double, if you're already wrapping something in the same string. So it doesn't close that statement right here. Now it's going to escape it and it will allow you to do that. So now if we save, go back here, it should refresh, new record in database. Now why don't we confirm if that's true? Localhost in our index.php, we have our table, Jackson Smith, jack@sun.com. Let's check in our phpMyAdmin. Jackson Smith, ABC123, timestamp, hello Jackson, this is my bio. And if I were to refresh again, it's not going to change because it's just going to keep telling me I've added a new entry. And then we have another Jackson Smith, a duplicate entry. There we go. So now we have a double instance of Jackson Smith because every time I refresh the insert, it's going to automatically insert this query. And as you probably know, that's not the best way of doing this because there's no way for the user to edit or add what they want to enter into your database. So we're going to do that with a PHP form. So I'm going to open up my get post PHP file that I had in my PHP folder from the previous section we worked on in PHP. And I'm going to copy the form because we're essentially going to use the same syntax and just add a couple more inputs. So copy the form and the paragraph here. It should be on line 79 of get_post.php. Go ahead and do that. And we're going to go back to our insert.php and scroll yourself down to your PHP script here. And we're going to, well, let's comment this out for now. So I'm going to just comment that. If I select it all and go command / in most code editors, it will comment out that code. So let's start by pasting our HTML form here. And we're just going to do a little rejigging here. So the form action and method is good. Now we're going to start right here. Name error, that's fine. We're going to use the same deal. Let's remove post name and just have it be username. And then the placeholder will be username as well. And then down here, email error. Instead of post email, it will just be email. This is good. Copy that. And we're going to have another input here. And this will be password error. Password error. And this will be password. And then placeholder, password. And then type will be password. That is an input type. And now the submit, we're going to change this to say add. And the value will also be add. So it says add or add entry. Okay, now save that. And we should have, let's see here. There we go. We have the username, email, password, and it shouldn't do anything right now. It's just going to submit to the same page. Nothing's going to happen. Now what we need to do is we need to do our if is set PHP that we did in our get post, the form lecture that we worked on just a little bit ago. And so we're going to go ahead and up in the header here, let's start under the include, and we're going to add our if statement. And this is going to be a fairly hefty one, and we're pretty much going to copy and paste from our get post. Now let's go back to make sure that's where it is. The if is set. Here it is. Yeah, so what we're going to do is copy the if statement in its entirety from get post and go back to your insert and paste it in here. And now we're just going to modify this to apply to our current page. So the post is going to look for if is set post add, because that's the new submit button. So build a function that validates the data. We have the validate form data. That's good enough because it's already built. We'll just reuse it here. Now, if you want it to be a little bit more efficient, then you could simply add a functions.php file and add this function, add it to that file, delete it from here, and then you could call that function as long as you include the functions.php. That would be a better way of doing it because now we have a duplicate function. And if you were to change one, then it's different everywhere. But for now, we're just going to leave it like so. And now we're going to go down here and we're going to change this stuff right here to be the username, email, and password. So what I'm going to challenge you to do right now is pause the video and modify all these if statements. You're going to have to add another one to check to see if the username is available in the post collection, if the email is available in the post collection, and the password is available in the post collection. And then they will have their respective errors, and they will also store it in their respective variables. So pause the video, try that out, and come back, and then I will add the correct code there, and then you can check yours just to see. So go ahead and pause the video. Okay, so here is the correct code. So we have if not post username, and name error is the variable I called. Please enter a username. Otherwise, add the validate form data username into the username variable. And then we have the email. We're checking to see if there's an email. And then we're validating the form data email right there. And then we have password. And then we're checking the password error, same deal. And we're adding the data to the password variable. Now what we want to do is take this query variable, cut it from outside of the if statement, and paste it inside the if statement. Now we want to call the query if it's inside within the if statement. We don't want it to just be sitting outside. We want to keep it inside. And then down here, we have our commented code here. Let's uncomment it. Cut the if statement. I'm going to remove that PHP script. And then go up here. After your query is where you want that if statement. So you're going to have an if statement within an if statement. I'm going to clean this up a little bit here. And that's going to basically, once you get through the post here, so if you're saying, if you click the add button, it's going to go ahead and try and add these variables and so on and so forth. And then it's going to set up the query. And then we're going to perform the actual insert MySQL query into the database. And so we're going to save that, but keep in mind, we haven't updated the query to have the proper values from the form. Right now, it's just going to insert this static query. We want this to be dynamic using our PHP, the variables that we set up here. So what do we do there? Well, we have them all stored here. So this is PHP. All we need to do is take these variables and add them into this query. So insert into, here's the syntax we're using. Values, we have null. Username, well, that's got to be the username variable, like so. And if you wanted, you could do something like this and concatenate it in there. But I am just going to leave it in the single quotes. That should work fine. Password, this is going to be the password variable. And then Jackson, the email, this is going to be the email. Current timestamp, and then we're going to leave the bio as null because we didn't add a form entry for that. Now, if you wanted to, you can go ahead and add a form field where they can add their bio, and then we could just enter it here using the variable up in there. Otherwise, this should be good to go. So let's go back to our page. And so here we have MySQL insert. Let's try and add an empty entry. Okay, it looks like it's adding a record and giving us errors. So what's the deal there? Let's check out our database to see what happened. I'm assuming it added yeah, kind of a weird, yeah, it kind of sent a weird empty entry here. So it's kind of working. I'm sure if we added if we added some form validation in there, or if we added some content in these text fields, then they will show up. But we need to validate to make sure the script doesn't go down to the query if these errors present themselves. So how do we do that? So then what we need to do, because what's happening is we're getting the errors here if these fields are empty, but it's still inserting the query into the database because it's not stopping the script if these are false. But the problem is, if we were just to say, if there was a problem, we just said exit the script on any of these, then what would happen? Let's just go and add an empty entry. Well, we get an empty page because what's happening is it's exiting the script and therefore exiting the rest of what follows, which is the HTML. So you could put your PHP within your HTML, or we could do something a little bit more sophisticated and create an if statement that basically checks to see, are all of these variables, do they all have entries now? Do we have data within these variables? Well, it's very simple. You just say if username, and that's all you have to put. Basically, that means if there's something in it, and you could do something a little bit more sophisticated if you want, like is not equal to empty or has the value of so on and so forth, but this should be good enough. And operator, email, and password. This simply says if all of these, so if this and this and this are not empty, then now we put this query and the if statement within that if statement. Notice how you can nest multiple if statements. So now what happens here is we have the if statement checking to see if they're empty. So let's say, and then if it does, then we're going to do the query, and then we will perform the if statement and then submit the query with the MySQLi query function. And then if it's false, then it doesn't do anything. It just skips this altogether and then just goes back down to our HTML, which will just show you the form with our errors. So let's confirm to see if that's the truth. I'm going to go back and refresh this page. Empty entry. Please enter username, email, and password. Do we have any extra entries in our database? Well, we have these three, but I added those on purpose. So let's just try another add entry. Refresh. Nothing there. So it looks good. So now if we just add one. Okay, now we have two errors. Let's try Brad and Brad at email. Okay, so it looks like it added an entry even with no password. So let's check to see if it added an entry. So it did. Now, did it add one without a password? Yes, it did. It added root because the password is probably passing in root by default. So now what we need to do to confirm that everything is, that these are empty by default and don't have something in it, we just need to go up here. And before any of this stuff here, let's create a variable that says username. So we're establishing these variables equals email equals password equals empty. So now they should be empty by default until we add data to them. And then that means, so this should work better. So let's go back. Add entry. Okay, it's asking me to add a username. Let's try email. Okay, now it's not giving us that bug there, and it's not adding any entries. I think we made it work. Brad, email here, and say just whatever. New record and database. There we go. Brad Hussey, brad@email.com. And it should be down here as well. Brad Hussey, blah, 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 blah. There we go. We have a null bio. Cool. Now, if you just wanted this this little alert up here to be nicer, well, instead of echoing new record and database, let's add a bootstrap div with the class alert and then alert success. That should do it. Let's see what happens here. New record and database. Looks good. So that's just a little bit nicer of a success message. Now, what I encourage you to try and do is create another input on your form here and have the user be able to add their bio. And once they've submitted that data, check to see if it's empty, if it's not. And you don't even have to worry about that really because you're allowed to have it empty in the database. You don't have to have a bio, so it's not required. And then submit it to the database in your query. So you have to update your query so that the biography is not null and it actually has the values of that text area that you're going to add. So go ahead and try that out and just experiment with your knowledge so far. But before you go, I want to make sure that we try and get into the habit of closing our PHP or MySQL connection. So notice how we have the script open here. What we're going to do is just like our index.php, I believe, we want to kill that connection, MySQL close. So I'm going to copy that function right here, go back to our insert, and then what we're going to do is let's just close it at the end of the script and make sure everything works. So I'm just going to close the connection, save it, and we'll just do a quick confirm that everything still works. New record in database, and we should have a new record for Jim Sparrow. There we go. And that basically kills the connection as well once you're done. So that's great. Go ahead and play around with what we've done so far, and I'll see you in the next lecture.